If there's one issue that is really, really important to me, it's this one, because I am living the consequences. It's all about control, and it's all about keeping you in your place. I knew I was in a bad place, but here's the thing. I didn't feel like I could leave because God had not told me to. Take what I'm saying to heart, because it could very well save your life, your livelihood, and everything else in between.
Welcome to Unbound,
A podcast for new atheists
and lifetime atheists,
ex-evangelicals.
truth seekers, and free thinkers.
There is life after faith
And life here is good. It's time for a new perspective.
and a better conversation. I'm Spider.
And I'm Shelle, and it's time to get unbound.
Welcome to another episode of Unbound. I'm Spider,
And I'm Shelle.
and we're going to continue our conversation about why Bible college is a bad idea. And toward the end of recording the last episode, if you haven't listened to that one, it became apparent that we hadn't really gotten into everything that we wanted in one shot with this. So here we are back for a little bit more. But before we get into that, we're not going to do a full-on Christians behaving badly segment on this one, but I did want to acknowledge the victims of the White Settlement Church shooting in Texas over the weekend. This latest act of domestic terrorism took the lives of 64-year-old Anton Wallace, a church deacon from Fort Worth, and 67-year-old Richard White. Apparently, a gunman opened fire during the communion service, and church security stepped in and killed the gunman. I just wanted to acknowledge this particular thing because shootings in general are a god-awful thing, and they have quite literally become a daily thing.
Right.
They're a daily thing now. Columbine, when it happened in '99, was it was not a unique situation, but it was one of the first ones that got a whole lot of public attention. And the number of these incidences has grown year by year, and it has reached epidemic proportions. I take particular interest in the ones that happen in churches, synagogues, mosques, because with all due respect, as toxic as these religions are, you shouldn't have to worry about getting shot and killed when you go to church.
No, you shouldn't.
And I think that it's horrible whenever something like this happens, but when I see it happening in the context of religion, it just reminds me of how crazy any kind of religion, let's not just pick on the evangelicals here, any kind of religion can drive you a little bit nuts. And when these things happen in churches, I just think that it's doubly shameful because, with all due respect, you go to church to commune with your God, who is supposed to also be your protector. And then something like this happens.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all for people abandoning their faith, but not in a manner that's spiteful or hurtful or that causes them trauma. I'm certain that if I was closer to the situation, it would really start having me question my faith. Like, where was my hedge of protection? Where was these people's quote-unquote hedge of protection when a gunman opened fire on them during communion?
Right.
You know, I would have serious questions and issues and problems with the very existence of a God that allowed people to walk through the doors of his house, knowing full well what was going to happen to them when they went in there. What sane parent would do any such thing? And this is what you have to think about when you start thinking about the love of your God, the love of God for people. Well, where is this even evidenced in the Bible? Where does God ever say that he loves anyone? And if he loved these people who died over the weekend, then where was he? I mean, if he's all-powerful, why did he do nothing to stop it? If he's all-powerful, why did he do nothing to stop the 5 more children around the world who died of starvation while I said that last sentence?
Yeah.
I mean, just think about that when just think about that in the context of a church shooting. If any place should be a safe place, a haven from that sort of thing, and have rock-solid protections built in, it would be a church.
Right.
If your God is all-powerful. If your God is on your side. If your God is pleased with the way that you are going about worshiping him and serving him, why on earth would he ever allow something like that to happen when he has the power to stop it. Just give it a thought or two. So let's get right back into the conversation that we were having before about why Bible college is a bad idea. I left off the last episode with an admonition to young people who are thinking about whether or not they should do this. The short answer is no. No, you absolutely should not go to Bible college. It is an awful idea. It will rob you of the money that you've saved for your education, or that you will be paying back until well into your 50s for your education. It will rob you of any sense of self that you may have. It will be a haven for all kinds of abuses. And we're going to get into the whys and wherefores of all of those statements right now, because I found just a treasure trove of information when I was trying to decide how I wanted to separate this into subtopics. I came across some very, very good articles, all of which will be in the show notes. I'm doing one show notes for both of these episodes, only because I'm going to be referencing some stuff from last week too. So I just want to get all of these resources into one place, and there's a lot of them. So once you hear this, you should also be able to see this entire list of sources. And some of them, well, some of them are just blogs. But some of them are sources like Forbes magazine, cracked.com, which when they curate their content, it's very well vetted. So in the spirit of accuracy and transparency, and it didn't just come right off the top of my head, and that it didn't just come right off the top of my head. I'm going to show you precisely where I got all of this stuff. And there are things, there are things about Bible college that, a quick Google search will tell you, but it's a lot more impactful when you hear it from someone who's been through it. Right. And that's why we are here, to tell you what it's really like, because we were there. And everything that I have looked at online, like I said last week, I don't feel bad saying Valley Forge Christian College, because they're a cookie-cutter version of every other Christian college out there, every other Bible college out there. Their rules are almost in lockstep with almost everything else that I've read, although there are some schools that are more extreme, and we're going to get into that too. Valley Forge was kind of a middle-of-the-road place in terms of the severity of the rules. Like, there are some Bible colleges that don't have strict dress codes. They're few and far between, but they exist. There are Bible colleges that don't impose curfews. There are Bible colleges that allow and disallow contact between the sexes. Valley Forge was never so ultra-conservative and prudish that they separated the boys from the girls. We even had open dorms. Right. Where everyone was allowed in a controlled way, and the doors had to stay open. Your dorm room door had to stay open, but it was a small price to pay. You got to have your girlfriend in your dorm room.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
For a couple hours.
Couple of hours, and you could never close the door, but whatever. It's not like we were all that demonstrative anyway. Right. You know what I mean? We kept our relationship pretty much to ourselves. There were some stolen kisses and snogs and a couple of stairwells here and there, but that's always fun. That's always it was a nice little bonding thing that we did when it was just between us. But I mean, that was about as risky a behavior as we ever engaged in that place. So we were able to function within the rules, but that didn't make the rules any less ridiculous. And with that, I want to get into some of the stuff that I found on some of the crazy rules at some of these colleges. So I'm looking right now at an article that I found on the craziest rules of Christian colleges. There are a bunch of these articles out there. So, I mean, if you just Google that search term, crazy rules of Bible colleges, you're going to come up with all kinds of stuff, and probably everything that I just came up with. Now, when I say crazy, I mean crazy to really an nth degree with some of this stuff. Like, just for the sake of example, if you go to Liberty University, you go there under the agreement that they can drug test you at any time. And they can do it for whatever reason. They can do it simply because they don't like you.
Right.
That's the crazy part. You get an RA that doesn't like you, you could be peeing in a cup every single day. Yeah. And there isn't a damn thing you can do about it because you agreed to that policy when you became a student. It's in the student handbook that you sign off on, and that is that. So you can't even begin to complain about it. Most people, it's one of those things that's so well known that anyone who sets foot on that campus for the first time has to know that this is something that's going to be expected. Mm-hmm. They have to know. So people go to this place knowing full well that their privacy is going to be violated repeatedly and at any time that somebody wants to do it. And people, it boggles my mind how people will just willingly walk into a situation like that. But you know what? I willingly walked into a situation that I knew wasn't good also.
Right.
Maybe not to the degree of, okay, now I'm going to have to worry about being drug tested. I didn't have to worry about being drug tested because I wasn't doing any drugs. But still, and my attitude used to be, when I was in the thick of this, my attitude always was, well, if you're not doing drugs, then what's the problem with being tested? Then why should you be worried about this? Why should it bother you? Because it's a violation of my fucking privacy. That is why it bothers me, and that is why it should bother you. Mm-hmm. Period. End of story. And I'm so thankful that I can finally see so much of this stuff so clearly, and that these issues, that I'm not siding with the wrong side on this. That my thinking is more based on how it impacts the individual than it is on the situation itself. Because with all due respect, having someone violate your privacy like that constantly for 4 years is wrong.
Yes.
It is flat out 100% wrong. There is no other way to describe it. There are no gray areas here. It's just plain wrong. And I have to wonder how many students at Liberty University have had to fight with the administration because they are on prescriptions for things like opiates.
Right.
And now they're being told that they're testing positive for heroin or something ridiculous like that. Right. And now there's this whole inquiry. I don't even know what their policy would be on something like that. You know, they may think that taking opiates for any reason is not a good thing, and they could throw you out for it if they wanted to anyway. Right. That's the thing about Bible colleges, is that they kind of exist in their own little vacuum. They can create their own little societies with their own rules, with their own ways of doing things, and you have to be in lockstep with everything they tell you to do. And if you step just one toe out of line, they're going to make sure that you are shamed to the nth degree for it. And that is just the way they operate. It's all about control, and it's all about keeping you in your place. Now, I haven't interviewed anyone from Liberty University. I haven't talked to anyone who was a student there. My guess is that this is not a thing that happens often. Like, if you go there for 4 years, you're probably not going to be expected to pee in a cup 25 times a semester.
Right, no.
But at the same time, with that whole thing just looming over you all the time, like you're constantly being watched, that's what the real problem is here. You say, I didn't look at it like that back then, but that's precisely what they're doing. They're keeping you under a microscope so that they can turn you into what they want you to be.
Right.
Bible college is not about your intellect. It's about the organization that runs that school having you as a captive audience for 4 years so that they can indoctrinate the living shit out of you and send you into the world penniless and without any hope of ever having a real life.
And to also instill the need for control so that they can control you easier when you're actually doing the ministry or whatever. You get used to being controlled.
You get used to being compliant very, very
Right.
quickly. And that was what the whole thing about my deportment score, my first
Right.
semester, was about. That was two people sitting there in a room across the table from me, basically making sure that I knew they were in charge.
Right.
Now, there was no discussion about this. I wasn't allowed to question her or anything.
Nope.
She sat there with her crocodile tears on while she grinned, while she gave me this shit-eating grin, standing behind the Dean of Men. And he is just blasting me for basically telling someone that I didn't appreciate being touched and being spoken to like I was a toddler.
Right.
I'm sorry, I was 17 years old. This person was just another student at the school. She was an RA, but big fucking deal. She was an RA. She had no right to talk to me that way. I told her so. And because she had the seniority and she was known there and she had been there for a while and obviously had enough of a reputation to become an RA, it was immediately decided that she was right and I was wrong. And there was no trial or hearing or anything where I would have been allowed to plead my case. There was none of that. I was simply told what happened and told what was going to be done about it. I was never asked any questions or given the opportunity to say anything. Okay? And there were other situations. Do you remember the very first, and I think it was the first or second week that I was on campus, and that security guy coming up to me and literally handing me a citation telling me I was speeding?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah,
I remember that.
It's like, how on earth, without any kind of traffic control or traffic measuring device,
Yeah, how do
are you
know
going to tell me, sitting in that tiny little security shack, how fast I was going when I was more than 50 feet away?
Yeah.
But because he said it, and because he had been there for a while, and because he obviously had enough reputation to be able to get one of those security jobs, he was right and I was wrong.
Yeah.
I refused to pay the fine. They refused to release my grades. And it was a Mexican standoff. I had to pay that fine if I wanted that semester's grades on my transcript. I'm pretty sure that that was illegal, but what the fuck was I going to do about it when I was 17 years old?
Right.
Okay, so you know what I did? I paid the fine. And that guy, for a couple of years, was on my case about a lot of things. A couple of weeks after that, I don't know if you remember this part, but this was after we had both gotten into that band.
Yeah.
And I was leaving a lot of my music equipment in our practice room. Well, I forget what the issue was, why we couldn't get in there, but there were certain times that the freezer that we were
The freezer.
that we were rehearsing in was locked up to the point where we couldn't get in. I mean, I think maybe it was just that our drummer
Yeah.
was the only one who had a key, and he probably wasn't around, but there was a master key at security. So I am supposed to be playing keyboard in church that Sunday. My stuff was locked up. I just needed to get to church. And I needed to have my stuff because I was in the worship band and I needed my keyboard to play keyboard in the worship band. And I went over to security and had to talk to the same guy because he was the only one who was there. And I told him what was going on, what I needed. And he literally stood there and had this look on his face like, why do you really want to get in there? And he didn't come out and make a direct accusation at the beginning, but eventually he did. He's like, I have no idea if this stuff is yours, and I don't know what it is that you're trying to involve me in, and I would rather not be involved. Now, that led to another altercation that led to another conversation with the dean. So now that's twice in my first semester that I'm in there defending myself. And this time I demanded for my voice to be heard.
Right.
And what this prick said to the Dean of Men was, it wasn't really a matter of I didn't believe it was his stuff. I just didn't think that he was in the right frame of mind to be leading worship at that point.
Oh, come on. Gosh.
And I looked at the Dean of Men and I said, is this what I can expect for the next 4 years? Other people psychoanalyzing me and trying to tell me what I'm good for and what I'm ready for and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. This guy doesn't know me from Adam. He's been giving me grief since I arrived on campus, and I didn't have an attitude until I was accused of being a thief.
Yeah.
I went over and very politely asked if I could get into that room to get my property. That was it. And he made it out like I was trying to pull something over on him, like I was trying to steal something and get his help to steal something.
Yeah.
It was more than implied. Mm-hmm. It was more than implied. And he didn't even bother to deny it either.
Well, no.
He said I had to use my judgment, and my judgment said that it was a bad idea to let him into the building. I think I'm forgetting at least one detail here, because I do recall that I actually got my stuff.
Yeah.
I got my stuff, and I was able to go do whatever it was that I was going to be doing that day.
Yeah.
So actually, you know what I think that was? Wasn't that when we were going to that church to do worship that with our little band?
Yeah.
That's what that was.
Yeah.
That's what this was. Within like a month or so, we were going down there fairly often.
Yes.
To provide the worship at their services.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I was the keyboard player in the band. I kind of needed my shit.
Yeah.
So that whole situation between the ticket and that, I was looking over my shoulder every single time I saw this guy.
Yeah.
For the next couple of years before he graduated.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
And I was in several classes with him. I made a note. Now, I was one of these people who used to like to sit closer to the front. Okay? I made a note of sitting behind this guy because I didn't even want him looking over my shoulder to see what I was writing in my notebook. Yeah. Because I had gotten that paranoid. And I had really just reached a point where I just didn't want to deal with him. Mm-hmm. And having him, and when there are only 600 students at your college, you see each other.
Oh, yeah.
You see each other constantly. So now the pressure is on for me to treat him like a brother. Yeah. Okay? That's number one, and that was what I was told in that meeting with the Dean of Men. You guys are brothers, and you need to start treating each other as such. I said I showed up in the spirit of brotherly camaraderie and asked for my keyboard, and he called me a thief. So,
yeah,
are we going to see a little bit of balance here, or what? That's the real question, and I never got a straight answer to that.
Well, no, of course not.
The funny thing is, after that experience, I don't think that I ever found myself in the dean's office again. No. And it wasn't because I'd learned a lesson. It's just that I learned, I learned how to just sort of blend in a little bit more, I think.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the whole car thing was him being jealous that he didn't have one. Honestly, it was one of those real infantile sort of things that just, was I speeding? If you want to talk about doing 27 instead of 25, maybe, but I mean, come on. And even so, you can't tell that from 50, 100 feet away. You can't tell. Mm-mm. So there was this whole thing at the very beginning of them establishing a pecking order. Okay. Yeah. It was made very clear to me where I stood in the grand scheme of things, and it was made very clear to me how things were done there. People we know, we trust. People we don't, we don't. Yeah. And there was a real us and them polarization that happened for me between myself and the people who were running that place, and it happened in a matter of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew I was in a bad place. But here's the thing. I didn't feel like I could leave because God had not told me to. Mm-hmm. That's the worst part of it.
Yeah.
And with that mindset of control comes a whole other list of crazy rules that you're expected to follow both on campus and off. Mm-hmm. Now, I can understand not wanting certain things in your midst when it's your house.
Right.
But as soon as I leave your house, I should be allowed to do whatever the fuck I want. And I did. To a certain extent, I did. My brand of rebellion wasn't all that rebellious, but I still did what I felt like doing. I still kept some porn in my room because I felt like keeping some porn in my room. I still went out drinking. I went out for drinks with a couple of friends once in a while because it was something I felt like doing. At the end of the day, people are just going to do what they want.
Right.
So when I read this about Brigham Young University, no premarital sex is allowed on campus or off. Well, you know what? Just take the name of any Bible college and put it there.
Right.
Because they definitely want to have control over what happens between your thighs wherever you are.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the way that it is. That's not just Brigham Young, but this particular person went there, and they said more specifically, Brigham Young University has also banned students from having premarital sex off campus. How they're going to police that unless the couple comes back and like tweets about it, I have no idea. But
I don't know.
It's just it's that level of arrogance. Like, yes, we can control you, and we'll do it with fear.
Yeah.
We'll do it with fear, and we'll do it with intimidation, and you'll just follow our rules because you're afraid not to. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, I wasn't afraid to bring that stuff right onto campus, was I?
No.
And no one was afraid to bring it. No one was afraid to bring the alcohol. It wasn't the stuff that we were afraid of. It wasn't really, for me, even the consequences of being found out. What it was for me would have been the public shaming, the embarrassment,
Right.
what they would put me through as punishment for that. I would have been a lot more upset over the shaming aspect of it.
Yeah.
Okay. I would have been a lot more upset over that than the notion of getting kicked out of a school that I already hated.
Yeah.
So that would bring its own set of problems with it, because and then you have to explain to your mother and your youth pastor and your senior pastor how you just got kicked out of Bible college for porn. It comes with its own set of problems, but for me, getting kicked out would have been the least of them. Right. Because I already hated the place. So if I was forced to go somewhere else and have a life, they probably would have done me a huge favor. Maybe I'll go back and tell my 18-year-old self to just leave it on the bed on inspection day. And by inspection day, yes, I mean that there was a day every week where your RA would let himself into your room and see how clean it was.
Yes.
And you would get a score for how clean your room was.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah. Every Wednesday, your RA would just go right into your room, whether you were there or not, with or without your permission, just to make sure that you were being tidy.
Yeah.
It's just, come on. And I failed that inspection more often than I passed it. And there were plenty of people that failed it more often than they passed it. And I think that it cost you like a paltry 1 deportment point.
Right.
Or something like that. I don't even know, actually, if it was a de facto thing that it affected deportment. I don't think that it always did.
It depended on how bad it was. If you consistently were like totally a mess, like every single week, it would start to add up. A couple
people come to mind.
Yeah, and it's like mine wasn't always great, but I also knew how to shove things in a closet.
Well, yeah, when push came to shove, we had these massive lockers.
Yeah.
In most, I don't think the girls had them.
The girls had closets.
Okay, but the guys had those military lockers.
Right.
Okay, those military hospital lockers, and you could shove a lot of stuff into those lockers.
Yeah.
So there were times when I knew that they were going to be checking out my room, and I just grabbed everything that was sitting around and just shoved it in a locker.
Yep.
And dealt with it later. And sometimes there were several weeks worth of stuff shoved into the locker by the time it got dealt with. But a lot of it was like laundry and stuff, so you kind of had to get it in a timely way. You got to get back in there and get that stuff. So things didn't really accumulate, but it was an easy way to just get that shit cleaned up quickly. And you provided the appearance of tidiness, even though the untidy was just lurking in that locker.
Right.
You see, they didn't really care about the way things actually were. They cared about the way things appeared. And that right there is evangelical religion in a nutshell. It has nothing to do with the way things are. It has to do with what their perception of their God is, what he's capable of, and what we should be doing with our faith. It's all very, very subjective in nature. And it really, the way that these schools operate, getting you into the habit of being controlled, right down to the point of having a virtual mother checking to see if you cleaned your room. And yet, just a week or so earlier, I was in a room being told that they intended to treat me like an adult. And then in the next breath, I'm being told I have a curfew. And in the next breath, I'm being told that I have to keep my room clean. And in the next breath, I'm being told that I can get deportment points taken away if I'm not wearing the right shoes. I wanted to bring this one up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I have always had issues with my feet. I've had 7 surgeries to correct clubbed feet over the years. The last one that I had was at age 14. Now, there are very few shoes that I can wear that are comfortable. I can't wear dress shoes all the time because they're just not comfortable. Well, dress shoes were the rule at Valley Forge, okay? So I got away with this for a while. It wasn't even the first month. I think it was like later on in the semester when one of the older RAs noticed that I was wearing black sneakers and questioned me about it. And I told him that I had a doctor's note, which I did. It wasn't a lie. I had it right there with me, not on my person, but it was in my room. So I actually did have a doctor's note. And I told him this, and I thought that was the end of the conversation.
Right.
He seemed satisfied, and I was okay with it. Next thing I know, I'm being approached again. Same guy. He's like, hey, I went to the dean's office. There's no note about that. I said, well, that's because the note is in my possession. It's not in the dean's office. He's like, well, that's not what you said. I said, well, that's not what you asked. I said, I have a doctor's note. I have a doctor's note, and I do. It is in my room. Would you like to see it? It's like, no, but the dean would. I'm like, oh, great. It's been a while since I've seen the dean. Let's go down there with the doctor's note so that we can put this to bed and I can stop being harassed about my footwear. So I literally went to my room, got the note. I don't think that he believed that I had a note. I think this is what the accusation was. It was such a petty fucking thing. But he just didn't believe that I had this note.
Yeah.
Finally, I was in a situation that I was going to win because I had the note. It was clearly from my doctor. It was from his own prescription pad. And to this day, I remember what he wrote on it because I had to ask him I knew what I was walking into. And I had to get a physical before I went to school.
Right.
So while I'm in my doctor's office for this physical, I explained the situation that I was going to be in and that my footwear was going to cause problems. So he wrote me a note, which read, and I'm pretty sure that this is a direct quote. Joseph has congenital clubbed feet and is unable to wear dress shoes. He must wear black Reeboks.
Yeah.
Okay, it was funny, but you got to understand, I couldn't wear anything but black Reeboks for the next 4 years because, God damn it, that's what that note said.
Yep.
So if I walked in there in black Nikes, then I would lose deportment points. So I got real used to wearing black Reeboks because I just didn't want to go and ask for another note.
No.
And you've got to know that if I was wearing anything besides black Reeboks, that I was going to get in trouble for it. That this guy was going to be watching me like a hawk from now on because I had the nerve to best him in front of the dean.
It's so crazy.
And it was, the initial conversation, it seemed pretty innocuous. He was an RA. He was doing his job. And I knew that there was a dress code. I signed up for this. I knew what I was getting into. And I wasn't trying to be non-compliant, and that was why I had the note. Now, you would think that in a community like that, my word would be good enough.
Yeah.
I said I had a note. Why would I be stupid enough to say I had a note if I didn't? Why was my word not good enough? Because It was something that he was not in control of.
Right.
And he wanted to seize control of the situation. So rather than just take my word for it and go on his way, he had to investigate because that was his way of maintaining control. So that was what I was put through over my footwear. And I believe me, it took all that I could muster to not explode at this guy, because this is long before anger management, and I was angry when we met.
Yes.
Okay? It was all I could take to not explode in front of this guy when he stood there and said, well, you don't really seem to have a problem walking or anything like that.
Oy.
And I looked at him and I said, shall I take off my shoes and socks and show you the roadmap of scars from all of the surgeries that I've had over the course of my life so far to correct this thing? Will that satisfy you? I mean, the insinuation there was that I got a fake note from my doctor so I could wear the shoes I wanted.
Oh, brother.
It's like, and you know, I stopped short of this too, but it was in my head looking down at his shoes. It's like, what's the matter? Are your shoes hurting your feet? You don't like to wear those nasty old dress shoes all day long? Poor baby. Maybe you should go to another fucking school.
Yeah.
You see, it was 30 years ago, and it still gets me hot under the collar.
Yes.
I mean, even then, I understood how batshit insane it was. But that was the type of thing that I was put through. And I kind of wanted to save that one for when we talked about emotional abuse. But there are so many other examples.
Oh, there's so many.
There are so many other examples.
So
We will
many.
get to all of that.
Yeah.
But back to the rules thing. Not that we ever left it, because that was all about idiotic rules.
Oh, yeah.
But back to a few other examples. We were talking about footwear. There are all kinds of crazy rules about attire and about appearance. And there are some really skewed sexist rules when it comes to when it came to the dress code at Valley Forge. Like the one that I always loved and adored. Well, there were two.
Yeah.
Now, these, in a way, kind of worked in favor of the ladies.
Yes.
Okay? Because the women were allowed to wear knit pants. Translation, sweats.
They just didn't look like sweats.
No,
They looked
no.
more formal. So
A little bit more,
yeah,
but they were sweats.
They were pretty much sweats.
Yes. So women were allowed to wear knit pants. I was not allowed to wear sweats.
Well, no.
Women were allowed to have earrings. I was not allowed to have an earring. Okay. There was one other one that was just in the front of my mind, and now I lost it. Oh, yeah. Skorts. Okay. The men were never allowed to wear short pants, but the girls, when it got a little bit warmer out, were allowed to wear skorts.
Yes.
Okay. And that was, I always, it's like, okay, so why can't I wear khaki shorts? Because you don't want to see my legs? That have something to do with it?
Could.
You know, it did.
No.
It did. That was the environment.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, they're giving you a concession. On the other, they're doing it for themselves.
Right.
You know, because these rules were made by men.
Well, yes.
Okay. So if you can write a rule that allows you to see some leg, but makes it look righteous, then why the hell not?
Well, just the fact that the girls really were recommended to wear dresses constantly.
Oh yeah, they didn't even. It wasn't even liked for them to wear pants.
No, they didn't really want you to wear pants. They wanted you to wear skirts. It was traditional, and that's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see you wear skirts. And I don't think that if you were doing anything in chapel, you were allowed to wear pants. You had to wear a skirt. If you were going to be on that platform, you had to be in a skirt.
I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
But it didn't affect me, so it's not in the forefront of
it's
my
not-
mind.
no.
But I vaguely remember hearing that before. Not that I was really paying that much attention to it, because I was kind of going into my happy place when I was in chapel anyway. And there's so many. I mean, I came up with like how many websites here? Let me go to my notes. On Insane Rules, I've got 5 websites, all with some of the same information, but definitely different information. A lot of it by school. For example, Liberty University. This was Jerry Falwell's school, not the Jerry Falwell School, but it was Jerry Falwell's school, Liberty University. They had a policy, they have a policy regarding R-rated movies, wherein if you are caught watching one, it's a $350 fine. That's an expensive night out.
Yeah, it is.
I'll tell you what. Do you remember the time that the two of us and a bunch of our friends kind of snuck into the student center while everyone was either already on break or getting ready to go on break?
Yeah.
And there were probably like 5 or 6 of us, or maybe just a couple of more. And you and I were working at the student center. There were 3 of us actually in that group that worked at the student center.
Yeah.
So we had keys. And no one was really paying attention. And with all due respect, that building had that dark glass on the outside.
Yeah.
So even when it was open, it looked closed.
Yeah.
So going upstairs and minimally lighting the place and watching movies, we were not going to be noticed.
Yeah.
Unless somebody really wanted to know that we were up there, we were not going to be noticed. You couldn't hear the TV from outside either.
No.
So we were up there and watching some of those R-rated movies, weren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, moving right along. So we, yeah, the things you learn about the Orange Spider. And we were there for a while, too. And it wasn't just one movie, because it was rebellious, and being bad feels pretty good.
Yeah, and
That's
it was a
why.
fun time.
It was very fun. And I found myself getting along with people that I normally wouldn't on campus, too, because there were a couple of people there that I knew that I didn't really like very much, but that little bit of shared rebellion went a long way toward not really becoming friends, but definitely having more camaraderie. You know, we had the same attitudes about the rules.
Right.
And that made a difference. You know, it made a difference in how I saw certain people on that campus. And the small group of us that were up there that day, I don't think that any of us were like besties.
No.
It was something that one member of the group decided to throw together. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a hush-hush sort of thing. I still have no idea how I got invited. Probably just because I worked there.
Yeah, we both worked
and
there.
That was probably most of the reason why I was in that room in the first place. But all I remember about that experience was that it was a real bonding moment. And we weren't just watching movies. We were raiding some of the supplies in the student center too. We made pizza. Mm-hmm. We did a couple of other and paid for it.
We paid for all this.
Yeah, we paid for the stuff that we used. So it's not like we just raided the place.
Man, I remember those pizzas now.
They were good.
They were good pizzas.
They were good. For prefab pizza shells, they were decent, and people liked the way I made them in particular. I remember that.
Oh, they liked all your food. They liked how you made the hamburgers and the milkshakes and God, I love that too.
And none of it earned me any friends because they were a bunch of takers.
Well, yeah.
And that was it. And yeah, they liked my stuff and they expressed that they liked it, but it was always in the context of some. It's hard to explain. It was always in the context of a certain attitude. You know, it's like, we're going to pay you a compliment, but we don't want you to make the mistake of thinking we like you.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. There's no better way for me to describe it because it was perceptual for me. People wouldn't really understand what I was thinking about in those moments, but I knew the difference between a real compliment and someone just, trying to be a little bit backhanded.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of backhanded complimenting going on in that student center, particularly about my food. But the same people kept coming back for the same things.
Yes.
So Yeah, there. So I that was another thing that I learned early on. It was that people aren't going to praise me for the things that I do well. I have to be comfortable enough with my own abilities to be impressed enough with myself.
Right.
And I sit and proof these episodes. Now I try to make sure that the content that you hear flows well, that it's, there's a lot of extraneous crap that I say behind the mic that gets taken out. So I make an effort to put together something that's going to be coherent, that's going to be entertaining first and foremost. And I listen to my own work, and I have to admit that I'm impressed with it. But I learned, and it's not an arrogance thing or a conceit thing. It's just that I learned early on that I just had to learn to be happy with my own accomplishments.
Right.
Because I went directly from an environment where I was treated like hot shit to an environment where I was just treated like shit. And at that point, I had to find solace in my own approval. And that is something that has followed me through the years. And when I listen back to these episodes, there are moments when I'm like, my God, did I actually say that? Because I don't even remember that coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And in the context of what I'm talking about, it's like, wow, you really did say that well. And honestly, I'm not sure I could say it that well twice.
Yeah.
So it's a damn good thing that we got it on, that we got the audio down. It's a damn good thing that we managed to record it, because who the hell knows whether or not, if I sat down to record that same episode again now, what would be forgotten, what would be lost, what would be different. And when I listen to some of these things, it's like, this is precisely how I want to convey this concept. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with looking at what you accomplish and being proud of it.
Right.
Because that was another thing that was a huge buzzword on that campus, was pride. Pride was not something that was considered a virtue.
No.
It was considered a defect of character. Mm-hmm. So when I took pride in that hamburger, I was sinning.
Right.
When I took pride in somebody coming back and raving about my pizza and ordering another one, that was sinning.
Yeah.
Because it was too prideful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since learned that pride, when it is properly placed and in the proper context, is a very good thing, especially when it comes to what you're good at.
Yeah.
A lot of times, young people choose to go to Bible college because they've been convinced through their own religion's dogma that they're not good enough.
Oh, gosh.
Okay?
Well,
they're not good
me.
enough for anything else. And now, here comes this adult saying, God has chosen you for this. And now, all of a sudden, here's something that you are good enough for.
Yeah.
And it ensnares a lot of these kids.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the ones that have self-esteem issues.
Yeah. I mean, that was completely me. That's why I went, because I figured if I could just do this one thing. But all of my anxieties kind of conspired to not allow me to make the best use of that education, such as it was.
Yeah, that was me too.
Yeah.
I had self-esteem issues up the yin-yang when I arrived on that campus, even though I came from an environment where I was treated like I was way above a lot of these people.
Right.
I think that if we wanted to, and I really don't, but I think if we wanted to, we could do an entire episode on Pensacola Christian, what is it? Was it Pensacola Christian College?
Something like that.
Yeah. So this particular school has been described as a little cult within itself. And there's a reason for that. I'm not even going to get into all of these things, but I know that there's a bunch of crazy ass rules that come out of this place. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So Pensacola bans men and women from being in the same area, and that includes the parking lot. And yes, it's Pensacola Christian College. There we go. Including the parking lots. So in order to stave off temptation, they separate the genders completely at all times. This is one of the most cultish things that I've ever heard.
Actually, one of the guys that went to church with me went to another Bible Institute in Rhode Island, I believe, that had the same type of severe separation of the sexes rules. I don't know if I can say the name because I think they're defunct, Zion Bible Institute.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that too. As a matter of fact, that was the first school that I had heard of
Right.
that kind of a rule.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if they're still around either.
I
A
don't
quick
think
Google
so.
search would tell me, but, I've done enough research on this subject already to worry about whether or not some wigged out little school who likes to separate the boys from the girls is still there. Pensacola is a much larger school. It's not large in terms of university numbers,
Right.
but it's a larger school and it has more of a following
Right.
than a lot of these schools do. And it seems like the more popular the place gets, the crazier the rules get. Mm-hmm. Pensacola Bible College, this little cult within itself, separates men and women in the dorms, classrooms, at lunch. You can't even have lunch
Yeah. It's
with
like,
someone else of the opposite sex.
I don't understand that. How? Why?
Did they have separate cafeterias? It just...
It sounds crazy. I'm just like, do they have a department of marriage where they match these people? Because how are you supposed to meet anybody? I mean, I know a lot of girls go in for their MRS degree.
Well, yeah, there is
That's
that.
the only way. I mean, seriously.
And what I don't think these people understand is the cinnier you make it, the more likely it is to happen.
Yeah.
Don't touch the hot stove. What are they going to do?
Touch the hot stove.
Or the hot girl. There you go. See that?
There you go.
But and some of these are just obvious. I'm scrolling through some of these crazy rules, and some of them are just obvious. I want to transition the whole rules thing into how some of these crazy rules apply to women.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked a little bit about dress code, but there are things that don't, in any way, shape, or form, work in the favor of a woman on a Bible college campus. And I'm sure you got some insight on that.
A little. I know there weren't very many pastoral students who were women. Most of the women in my dorm were in Christian ed. That was the easiest way to do ministry if you were a woman.
Right, just become a teacher.
Take care of children.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be taking care of children. This was before the Quiverful movement really got in full swing, but people were beginning to talk about it by the end of school that, we don't want to use birth control. We just want to have as many kids as God is going to allow us to have. I thought they were nuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, have all these kids that society can now pay for.
Right. But it was always difficult. Women were relegated to a certain extent. You had to have a real forceful personality to be a woman in pastoral ministry. And because you are going to go into a joint ministry with your husband if you have one. And chances are you're not going to get hired if you don't have one because it's still very patriarchal. And we were not encouraged to have strong personalities. We were
of course
supposed to be in the background, make sure that we could raise the children right, and make sure that we could back up our husbands in whatever he said or did, and basically just be nice, submissive little wives. And it was easier for me because I didn't know what the hell to do with my life. For me, it was easy to fall into that because I was so anxious about everything. And after a while, when you are anxious about everything, it is extremely hard to make friends because you're always flaking out, you're canceling things, you're backing off because you can't deal with stuff. And unfortunately, they treated it like demon possession.
Oh, yeah.
And the only help I ever got from Pentecostals was prayer. More prayer.
They never tried to help the individual.
No.
They always blame problems like this on some kind of an external.
Yeah.
And demons are easy.
Yeah,
They're
because
easy because they just represent the negative.
you can just pick a demon and label it with the term oppression, and that is what you have. You have a demon of oppression, and we need to cast it out. I have had so many demons cast out of me, you'd think I'd be well.
Yeah, I know. And now I don't think that I was around for any of that.
No.
When were these things happening? 'Cause
These
you
were
mentioned this
happening
last week.
especially the first 2 years that I was there. And after that, I didn't go up anymore. I didn't go for prayer anymore. I didn't come up because they were just going to do the same thing. And I figured it must be my fault. I must not have enough faith. I must not pray well enough. I must not be doing all the things that I should be doing as a Christian, or else I wouldn't have this problem. Because to me, it seemed like everybody else had their crap together, but I couldn't seem to figure out where mine was, much less get it together.
Well, you just used the right word there, seemed.
Yes.
You know, when they get you into that mindset of thinking that you're not good enough, then you can't see
Right.
that the other people around you are going through the same things at the same time,
Right.
because you think that it's all about you.
Right.
And you're taught to think that it's all about you.
Of course. But that's a problem. I don't know if it's any different on campuses now, but they didn't have a counseling center.
No, they
They
didn't.
had a nurse on staff for the medical issues, like if you had a cold or whatever, they could say, okay, you need to go to the ER. They didn't have a medical center on.
But you have to understand, we're talking about a college that only had psychology courses because the state told them they had to.
Right.
So, yeah, they're not going to be looking at the mental health aspect of these things because they don't have any
don't
clear
believe
directive
in it.
on how to deal with these things. And that's why there's so much crazy in their religion.
Right. And I'm supposed to be talking about women's issues. But at the same time, this is a women's issue because it's all part of what we are.
Yeah.
You know?
And you are here to also talk about women's issues.
Right.
Okay, not just.
No, not just.
So the fact that this has universal application
Right.
it's really par for the
Yeah.
course, because like I said in our very first episode, we're talking about a religion that is intimidating to the men because we're placed in a position where we have to adhere to certain standards.
Right.
But it insults and degrades women.
Right.
Because it treats them like second-class citizens.
Yes.
And puts the man ahead of the woman in everything.
Yes.
It's really just two sides of the same problem.
Right.
Because on the one hand, on both hands, you have people who are fighting to be relevant.
Right.
We fight as men to be relevant in these situations by keeping up with other men. Mm-hmm. And women find their relevance how? I'm not going to say this is
No.
how, because you're sitting right there.
Because you find your relevance by marrying the right man.
Yeah, that's
You
that's
have relevance when you become married. That is when you get your relevance.
when you have your MRS degree.
Yes. You
see-
get that relevance because if you are single, you are discriminated against.
But that's men and women.
That's
okay,
both.
That's what we talked about this last
The
week too.
nuclear
Where
family is sacrosanct.
I was told in so many words that it would help me tremendously if we moved our wedding date up.
Right.
And I sat there and you know the person I'm talking about.
Yes,
You've
I
got to
do.
remember him.
Oh, please.
And just the matter of fact way that he said it, like this is a normal thing that anyone going out looking for a job should have to worry about.
Right.
It was amazing how normalized it all was and how no one even questioned the right or wrong of it.
No.
And I was literally told that I needed to make this major life decision and make it faster. Mm-hmm. Because time's wasting and you need a job. So instead of having a couple of months to plan and prepare for our wedding after I graduated, no. 3 weeks out of college, I'm a married man.
Yep.
And it was quite the whirlwind.
It was tough. I did not really know how to be a person who had to be in charge of things or be responsible for things. I'd barely been on my own. I was never on my own. I went to college and then I came home and waited for my wedding to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not effective for someone learning how to take care of themselves.
Right. I think all the time about how we might have done things a little bit differently. But honestly, whether we had gotten married or not, we probably would have gone directly from that environment to living together anyway.
Yeah, probably.
So I'm not sure if that opportunity was ever in the cards for either of us. It's one of those few things that I stopped short of blaming the religion for.
Right.
Because one way or another, I think that we would have transitioned pretty much the same way.
Probably.
Think about some of the things that applied to the women and not the men that bothered you.
Honestly, it was just the dress code was one of the hardest parts. They didn't take care of the campus, and the girls were walking around in heels. I mean, even if you were just in dress flats, when you're walking on roads that are strewn with gravel because that's what they put into the potholes to make them not so potholy.
Right, yeah.
I twisted my ankle so many times. I had 2 or 3 like elastic ankle bracelets because I was going to make ankle braces because I was going to twist my ankle at least once every single semester. I was going to do that. But otherwise, no one ever checked up on me academically or said, hey, this is what you should be doing. You need to do this, that, and the other thing. I didn't really understand that I was missing credits until I had to do another whole semester.
Yeah, and I remember that whole thing. And it's like, why do we have academic advisors if they're not going to help us graduate on time?
Right. And I was just,
Your father was livid.
Oh, yeah, he was not happy. He was not happy. And I wasn't happy. I was like, okay, but what? Why am I not? And why? But nobody checked up on me. And I don't know if it was different for any of the other girls because we didn't talk about this stuff.
Right.
And this is one thing that happened that bothered me.
Oh, go for it.
This wasn't even at a chapel service in the dorm. I know that one of the girls had gotten a call from home, and she had found out that one of her friends from home had gotten raped and murdered. And I remember that time she was out in the open part of the dorm. It was still inside the dorm. And she was just sobbing and crying and saying, where was God? Where was God when this happened? She was a virgin. Why did she have to die like this? Where was God? And no one could answer her adequately. I am remembering that now. And I don't know what the answer was. I don't know what the answer was. I don't know what they told her. But I just remember that the girls were trying to reassure her and they could not do it because we were alone.
Because there's no answer to that question.
There is no answer to that question.
There is no answer to the question of where is God. You know why? Because he's nowhere.
Yeah. And it's just, I went back to my room that night and I couldn't answer that question either. And it was very scary. I know it was later. I was probably a junior. But it's like, I don't know the answer to that question. I feel like I should know the answer to that question, but I do not know.
And no one did.
No.
No one could ever give me an answer for the question of why so many horrible things happen in this world. And again, in the amount of time that I've been talking, at least one more child has died of starvation somewhere in the world. And the question of where is God? I mean, people have been trying to answer this for eons. And it all comes back to the same thing. Well, you just have to have faith. And there would be some scumbag out there somewhere who would say that that girl was raped and murdered because she didn't have enough faith.
Yeah.
There's some scumbag out there that's going to say that.
Oh, yeah.
And I know this because I've seen things similar on social media where this girl is talking about, well, where was God when I was being raped? And this arrogant prick of a guy comes back at her with, if God wasn't there, you wouldn't have made it through it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Come on.
That's crazy.
Come on.
Oh, remember one of the last Pentecostal churches we went to? And that one word faith evangelist was just talking about how if you're sick, you don't have enough faith. And I think I was probably like 18 months after my mom had died of cancer.
Yeah.
And I was livid.
It was a little bit longer because we were already in West Springfield because that's where that church was.
Right.
But man, that guy loved the sound of his own voice.
Oh,
And
God,
I
it was
could
like
see
45 minutes, half an I don't even know.
he went on for an hour and a half.
Oh, and I was just like, I wanted to get up and just strangle him.
Oh, yeah.
I was not happy.
I could see it. And I was like, do we need to go? And you didn't want to make a scene, so we stayed.
Yeah.
But that was the last time we went to that church.
Oh, yeah. I was done. I was done.
We are starting to trail off a little bit on this particular topic. So I feel like what we've done with this so far is sufficient.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end off with just maybe another couple of minutes talking to the young people because we've thrown a lot more information at them now. And I just want to talk to you one more time. Those of you who are out there and considering going to Bible college, for starters, don't. Just don't. It's a bad idea on a good day. As far as the reasons why, because, for me, even at 17 years old, don't would not have been a good enough reason for me. So let me tell you why. Well, for starters, rewind about an hour and a half and just start listening to this episode again. And really, really think about the types of things that you will be expected to live up to. These things don't really exist on secular campuses, okay? You're allowed to be an individual on most secular campuses, although some of them do have some tight rules about certain things. For the most part, it's more about taking that time to discover yourself and figure out who you are and what you want to be when you grow up. Whereas when you go to Bible college, that stuff has been decided for you before you ever step on campus. And they will not teach you how to have autonomy. They will not teach you how to think. It will be 4 years of indoctrination and very, very little else. Now, I was in the unique position of being under a couple of professors that did promote thinking. And well, I thought my way right out of that religion as a result. So teaching young people in Bible college to think is a dangerous thing. And they know it. So it's not about teaching you anything. It's about conveying ideas that they expect you to agree with. And you get 4 years of that. 4 years that you could be spending working on a pre-law degree. 4 years that you could be spending learning something about the world around you instead of this tiny little cloister that you've shoved yourself into in this Bible college. And most of them are tiny cloisters. Most Bible colleges don't have more than a couple thousand students. And schools like Valley Forge, let's call it by its current name, Valley Forge University, is on the smaller end. When we were there were about 600 students. I think the numbers from that 2013 article in Forbes that I mentioned last week showed it to be about 1,000.
Yeah, maybe.
So they really haven't grown by that much. I mean, it's 2/3 more than what they had when we were there, but it still hasn't grown that much.
No.
In that amount of time, it's still a little cloister, an island unto itself, with its own rules and its own way of doing things. And that is a very Assemblies of God concept. Every church and every satellite organization, including all of their schools, are considered autonomous. So they make their own rules. The fact that most of the rules in these places are pretty much identical, or at least are within the same strata of each other, is a result of the type of thinking that brings those rules about in the first place. So it would not surprise me in the least to learn that there were a bunch of different groups of people, not comparing notes, who came up with all of these rules and all of these guidelines for what they wanted their schools to look like, independent of each other. Because the religion that they're in promotes the type of thinking that leads to those rules being put in place. So you get a few extreme examples here and there, like Pensacola Bible College. You get some extreme rules that stand out, like being fined for watching an R-rated movie. But the real dangerous part of this is in what it will do to your future if you don't have a plan B. And the funny thing is that there are students that walk into Bible college and understand this. I actually was decent friends with this one guy. He was one of the married students, or actually he got married, and he had been engaged for a while. It wasn't one of these things where they met in September. But he was living in my dorm in September and moved into married housing between semesters because that's when they got married. It just so happened that that was when it was all happening. And this guy, after 2 semesters into a bachelor's program, I was over at his apartment and he's like, I think I need to get out of here. And I said, well, and now I had my own thoughts about this at this point too. But, I figured let's hear what he has to say. Let's hear where this is going. And he said, honestly, I feel like if I'm going to be a married man and starting a family, I need something that's going to be more concrete in terms of income, because I'm getting vibes off of this place that tell me it's going to be difficult for me to make it with the degree that I'm going to get here. So I'm thinking convert to a 1-year certificate, get out of here and go learn a skill. Mm-hmm. And that's precisely what he did.
Yep.
I don't know what he's doing today because, I don't think I talked to him again after they left.
Yeah.
But that was one of the few moments where I saw somebody on that place applying reason and logic to their situation.
Yeah.
And it was smart. And I really should have taken a leaf from that book. But I had been convinced by the people that got me involved in this in the first place that it simply wasn't necessary for me to worry about doing anything else because it was pretty much guaranteed that I was going to be successful. And this was coming from people who knew me, who had an invested interest in me, who had worked with me and cultivated me for this. So, of course, that's going to be their perception of it. Well, guess what? There were very, very few opportunities for me because I was too outside the mainstream.
Yeah.
My personality wasn't right. My physique was not right. My wife wasn't right. And it just... It was sickening watching the way that some of these people dealt with you, especially some of the pastors' wives.
Yeah.
In that period where I was going on all those interviews and you were being dragged along just so that they could assess you.
Yeah.
And never liking what they saw in either of us. It wasn't you. It was us. And it was my level of honesty because I wanted these people to know what they were getting.
Right.
And I was criticized for that by my youth pastor and my senior pastor. Like when I went for my licensing meeting and they asked me a few specific questions, I told them, you know what? I'll keep it away from your pulpit, but I'm not going to pretend to believe this if I don't. And it kept me from getting ordained in that organization. But you know what? I didn't walk away with my ordination. I walked away with a real hopeless feeling like I really had just squandered 4 years of my life.
Yeah.
But you know what else I walked away with? My integrity. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was worth a whole lot more. Because if I was going to follow through with this, then it was very important to me that I did it with a high level of integrity.
Right.
And I didn't want to do things just so that I could curry favor. I didn't want to do things just to make other people happy. And I didn't want to do things just to be accepted. I wanted to do things because they were meaningful. If you want to do something meaningful with your life, young person, don't go to Bible college. You will not find yourself there. You will not learn anything about the world there. You will not understand other people. You will not understand non-Christians. You will not understand, and you will be afraid of atheists.
Yeah.
Do I sound scary to you, or do I just sound smart? Okay? Take what I'm saying to heart, because it could very well save your life, your livelihood, and everything else in between. Don't go to Bible college. And if you get absolutely nothing else out of what I've said over the last 3 hours, just understand that it's the worst decision that you will ever make in terms of your education. You will regret it. You will not have a career. You will have to go back to school for something else, or you will have to learn a trade. You'll have to do something, because you will never, on average, I shouldn't speak in absolute terms here, but chances are you'll never make a dime on that degree.
No.
You'll never have anything to show for the time that you spent, the effort that you made, and the money that will just disappear into a hole and never return. Money that will disappear so deep into that hole that it'll leave a $200,000 dent in the income that you could have earned. Don't go to Bible college. Don't listen to your youth pastor. Don't listen to the people who are telling you that God is telling them that you need to do this. Tell them that God needs to dial direct. Or better yet, forget the whole damn thing. Go to a real school, start seeing what the real world looks like, and start getting yourself unbound. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Unbound. Show topics are chosen based on their timeliness, relevance, and social impact. Have suggestions for future topics? Email us at unbound.podcast.network@gmail.com with all your comments and feedback. Please don't forget to like, share, and throw a few 5-star ratings our way, and follow us on all major social platforms. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Links to our social pages, as well as a full list of cited sources in today's episode, are listed in the show notes, available at our website, getunbound.org. That's get-unbound.org. If you value this resource and would like to see it continue, please consider supporting us on Patreon at the link in the show description. And be sure to check for new updates every Sunday when we'll come together again and take one more step toward getting and staying unbound.